Welcome to the Resilience Breakthrough Podcast. This is Christian Moore.
And I'm Dave Biesinger. Let's go.
Let's go.
Wait, what are we calling this?
I don't know. I'm thinking we're going to go with the Resilience Breakthrough Podcast. My book is called the Resilience Breakthrough.
Oh, yeah. You wrote a book.
Yes. So I think we could maybe play off the book name.
I like that idea.
All right.
You think anybody's going to listen to this?
I have no idea, and I do speak to quite a few people, and so I'm hoping, as I go across the country for the last, 20 years, I've been, traveling. The last 4 or 5 years, a lot of people ask me, Christian, why in the world do you not have a podcast?
Yeah.
You talk nonstop.
Yeah.
We should probably have a podcast.
All it took was a global pandemic for you to finally start a podcast, Christian.
That is true. I think we're on day 5 of this thing?
Of quarantine.
Yeah.
We have our social distance, by the way, for any listeners.
Yes.
If you're listening to this in the future, you may not know what that means, but I think everybody in the world has heard the phrase social distance. Like, it's so funny because if you said the word the phrase social distance to me 2 weeks ago,
we would know what it was.
Well, it's a negative. I would have been like, yeah, that sounds like somebody who's isolated or something. Now it's like everybody keeps social distance.
The great irony of that, I've spent the last 20 years talking to schools and mental health agencies and all these organizations about bringing people together. Human beings, we're social creatures. We need as much connection and being close as we possibly can. And so there's great irony in this. Just the word social distance is the opposite of what we've kind of taught for years.
I know. And like, have you walked in? I mean, I know you have because I was with you. Remember we walked into that restaurant to get the pizza last night?
Yes.
And there's this awkward moment. There's another woman who walks in and she's like, we're afraid she's going to pick up our food. And we are trying not to be too close to her.
Yeah.
It's bizarre. Like if as I see people on the street, I'm like, okay, maintain 6 feet.
Yeah. It's
I've never felt anything like it.
Yeah, it's up until this point, the world before that was becoming a little bit more isolated because of social media and different things, and how much we know kids are spending 8 to 12 hours a day on their phones and disengaged a little. But I'm excited to be doing a podcast.
Oh yeah, that's what we're talking about.
I'm excited. Now I should tell you, I'm with one of my favorite people on the planet, Dave Biesinger. We should probably both introduce ourselves a little bit more in depth. But I was thinking something kind of funny. I'm thinking maybe we'll introduce ourselves in a minute, but I'm thinking maybe I'll start out by introducing you.
Oh.
Then you introduce me.
Okay.
And we kind of go from there.
I like it. Who's going to start?
I'll start introducing you. Now, best way I can describe Dave Biesinger, he is a Renaissance guy, very Renaissance.
Oh.
So Dave is a type of person I can have a conversation with on pretty much any subject matter, and that's one of the reasons I love being around him. And a lot of people don't know that side of Dave, but Dave is everything from a technical person to a philosopher to his goal is to really help the human condition heal. He's the type of guy, he would give you the shirt off his back if he sees someone hurting or needs something. He will definitely go the extra mile to help them out. So that's my kind of personal introduction of the great Dave Biesinger. But
hopefully it's not like overpromise, underdeliver.
So that's my world view of Dave. And he's also been a mentor to my kids. My kids love him. My kids refer to him as funny because Dave has skills, technical skills, and you probably pick up on this. My skills are more verbal. So if like something needs to be fixed around our house, we're having a technical problem, my kids will say, hey, call your friend Dave. And so Dave is kind of, again, he's a Renaissance guy. He's also been an actor, a performer, he's a professional communicator, he's been a speaker. I don't know what you have not done on this planet, but
I've never been a janitor.
You've never been a janitor.
Well, actually, I'm my family's janitor, so I take that back.
Yeah. So you have done that.
Yeah.
So
I cleared a few toilets.
So that's Dave Biesinger. So I give you a little feel from Christian's perspective.
Okay. My turn. You ready?
Yes, sir.
All right. The first time I met Christian, he had drawn a picture of a roller coaster. And he talked about how, we could take the harder but worth it track, or we could take the, the easy fast track. And I was, at the time, I got to admit, I'd spent most of my life riding that easy fast track and crashing. Anybody familiar with Why Try is going to know exactly what we're talking about. If you haven't heard of Why Try yet, this is a visual metaphor that we use to teach that, decisions have consequences. And I needed that message in my life when I first met Christian. He had drawn these little pictures. This was before Why Try was even a company.
Yeah.
I mean, Christian was working as a therapist, and he was doing therapy groups with my then friend, soon to be girlfriend, and then soon after that to be wife. And I'm still married to her today. Her name's Amy. And Christian just left a really strong impression on me. And I remember thinking, oh, I'd love to work with a guy like that. You know, he's this philosopher. You know, he talks about deep things, but he's also funny. And he really cares. Like, I just remember you were one of the few people I had met who was a really good listener. You know, you would really listen to what I was saying. And then you would weave it into, you know, your therapy or your philosophies. You adapted, you adjusted. And I've noticed that over the years, Christian, like you pick things up from different people in different places, and you just kind of weave it all together. And it's a beautiful thing. And I think Christian's main talent, and I think many of you who've heard him speak will agree with this, I think Christian's golden touch, that's the wrong thing, I'm like mixing metaphors here with a metaphor guy, is the ability to take something complicated and just make it simple and easy to understand. Like, I think that's your genius. You know, you can think about deep things, you can talk about deep things, but like the visual metaphors of Why Try and the 4 sources that you talk about in the Resilience Breakthrough, like, you just got this talent for taking things that are complicated and making them simple so that people like me can understand them.
Or it could be, I don't understand complicated things, so I have to make everything simple. I have no other choice.
Yeah.
It's either one or the other.
But, you know, Christian, another thing that you should know about Christian is Christian has some of the best taste on the planet when it comes to eating. So, like, Christian and I, we go out to eat every once in a while, and usually when we order, I'm just like, give me whatever that guy's getting, because he knows how to.
Let me put this in perspective. Why I became a little bit of a foodie, and why when people spend time with me, they'll usually let me order. It's not for any real great reason except complete travel insanity. I've been traveling for 20 years. For about 7 years of those 20 years, I traveled 260 days a year. That's 260 meals times 3 in a restaurant, because you're on the road. You have to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And being a road warrior and traveling these 7 million miles.
That's 780 meals, by the way.
Oh, is that 780 meals? Yeah. Thank you. Those that know me know I have pretty severe learning disabilities in math and reading. So it's nice having someone like
I
Dave.
just made that up. It's not actually.
Oh, it's not actually. Oh man, come on! I want to know what that real number is. I don't know.
I don't know.
And somebody just did the math on it. Okay, was it really? Okay, I didn't even know. I'm so dumb. So anyways, so when you eat that many meals, I've probably in the last 20 years, literally I've eaten more meals in a restaurant than at home. So I do advise someone, if you are with me in a restaurant, I know my way around a menu really well.
Especially Popeye's chicken.
True. And it's also why I'm in top physical condition right now.
That's right.
And so, since you can't see me, there's not a camera on me, I'm pretty much, I got a 6-pack. I weigh about 145 pounds.
He's got a 6-pack of Dad's root beer. No, definitely. He's got some abs. He's got definitely some abs going. So Christian, part of what we want to talk about in the podcast here is resilience. And what I want to ask you about is, when I first met you, you were talking about, decisions have consequences. You were talking to, kids who are at risk. Resilience wasn't really in the picture at the time. But then years later, you guys ended up writing a book about resilience. So somehow I think you discovered that underneath all of these other principles, there was resilience. Talk to me about how you discovered that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I spent 20 years almost, teaching social and emotional, just teaching skills to help kids, bounce back, helping kids understand their decisions have consequences, how to tear off the labels, control their emotions, their defense mechanisms, how to get plugged into a support system. So we're teaching skills to help kids thrive. And we noticed that some kids would take these skills and really, really thrive and bounce back. And other kids, we could teach skills all day long, and they oftentimes had no desire, they had no motivation to bounce back, to put one foot in front of another. So I just started thinking to myself, is there a way to figure out where resilience comes from within, internally? I mean, we use the word breakthrough because we realized several years ago, if we could figure out where resiliency is internally, that inner motivation to push through, to not give up, that can be somewhat of a big deal to be able to answer the question, where resiliency comes from. It's literally a skill you can learn. When I was in graduate school, a lot of my professors told me you can't hand someone a prescription for resilience.
I remember. So I actually remember where I was standing when I was talking to you on the phone, and you were telling me, dude, I think we can actually teach resilience. I was like, what are you talking about? Because I remember reading at the time, this was, I think, I gotta put a date on it. I think it was back around 2006, 2007, when you were telling me on the phone, I think we can actually teach resilience. And there were a lot of studies coming out at that time that, why does one kid in the hood, bounce back? Why does one kid who has challenging circumstances get out of it when so many don't? What makes the difference? And they were saying it's resilience, but they were saying it was more of an innate thing. It was just something they were kind of born with. Some kids were born with this resilience, and then other kids didn't. And if they had it, they had to tick it out. And if they didn't have it, there was no ticket.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you were telling me it could be taught. And I remember going, oh, come on. You can teach it? All these studies right now are saying that it's just something in you.
Well, I can tell you, 10 years ago, we started looking at this a little bit. A lot of people were telling me, what works with one person is never going to work with another person. And, as a social worker, I'm a clinical social worker. I spend most of my time working with people who have high trauma and are crashing, they're having difficulties. And so for you to come into my office for therapy, no one's coming to my office for therapy that has high trauma and are thriving. You don't go meet with a counselor and you're in that situation. But I started realizing, wait a minute, there's this huge population that has tremendous challenges, tremendous difficulties, and a big percentage of that population still thrives. But again, as a social worker, I don't work with that population. So I thought, all right, I'm going to start paying attention to children, even families, where they're dealing with tremendous poverty, abuse, violence. But say the child, he still finished high school, he got a scholarship, or she got a scholarship, they're thriving. And these are people with high trauma who are high flyers. Again, mental health workers like me, we don't spend much time with that population. I thought, wait a minute, what if we started studying that population and trying to figure out, okay, when you have high trauma and you're not shutting down, what are you tapping into? And that kind of became the forerunner of the book. And to be really frank with you, also at the time, I had gone through a pretty difficult challenge in my life. And I had dealt with a tremendous challenge. And, those that don't know my background, when I was 28 years old, I had never made over $6 an hour. I had dealt with a lot of different challenges in my life. I come from a family of 12 kids. Both my parents had some mental health issues. And I had graduated from college, had a little bit of success as a speaker, out there on the road and having some success. And then I kind of dealt with a rock bottom situation. I thought, man, if I'm going to pull myself out of this, and at the time I was dealing with some anxiety, some depression, some pretty tough stuff I was going through. And I was like, all right, if I'm going to bounce back from this, I got to tap into something. And so kind of at that same time, I was thinking to myself, why don't I start paying attention again to people who have high trauma, who are thriving? And as I was speaking across the country, people started saying to me, have you ever thought about paying attention to this population? I started paying attention to it, and I kept seeing 4 things kind of bounce up over and over. And today we're not going to get into that in depth, but we'll come back. I realized
there's such a tease.
I know. So I realized there's something called, relational resilience, something called street resilience, resource resilience, and rock bottom resilience. And we'll talk about all 4 of these when we have a little bit more time. But right now, this podcast, I think we just trying to get it off the ground and introduce myself, introduce you to the world. And but I'm excited to share these 4 sources of resilience. And we've looked at now thousands of people who have overcome and bounced back. And we've noticed they're usually tapping into at least 2 of those 4 sources. And in working in these 30,000 schools across the country, we know for sure resilience is a learned skill. You don't have to be born with it. So we're excited about that.
That's huge. I mean, that really is huge, if you think about that. Because everybody faces a challenge. It's just a matter of degree, right? It's all relative. Right? Like one person's challenge might seem like it's petty. We always say first world problems, right? But, hey, for sure there are people out there who are, in Africa and recruited as children, to fight in wars and experience horrific things. And those people, obviously, they have to tap some serious resilience just to stay alive.
Like Viktor Frankl.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you look at the Holocaust, all these people, we know human beings have all had tremendous opposition, tremendous challenges.
Everybody.
What's interesting is we can't find a situation. We look at human history.
Right.
We really can't find a challenge or situation that human beings have not bounced back from. I mean, of course, you could be death. We're in the middle of a pandemic right now.
For sure, like,
I want to be careful how I say
a survivor bias, right?
Absolutely.
Because the people who don't bounce back tend to go away or die, and that's true. And that's sad. That's true.
Yeah.
But we're all here. Like the human race is resilient. Like we've been through a lot of trials, a lot of challenges. And that's because we didn't go the way of the dinosaurs. We're still here.
No, absolutely. What's really fascinating right now as we have this conversation, the world is in the middle of a pandemic. And so I think resilience in the next 3 to 5 years is going to be huge. But I'm very optimistic that we will come out of this stronger. When we have opposition or we have a difficulty, I've learned that there's really two choices. No one's ever showed me plan C. Is either going to be your best friend, plan A, or plan B, your worst enemy. And I look at challenges in my own life. They either chew me up, spit me out, eat me for dinner again, or I use them as a resource. And it's one thing to tell someone, hey, we want you to use these challenges as a resource, but they really need the skills to do that. And I promise you, in this podcast, we are going to share the specific skills because I think it's really important we don't leave someone hanging, because to me, that's very much false hope to tell someone, hey, you can overcome this, but how? And that's really important to me. And that's when I wrote the book, The Resilience Breakthrough, was to really answer that question. But going back to what I was just saying, the third thing is, someone said to me one time, well, you can either, it's your best friend or your worst enemy, or you can do nothing. You could sit on the fence. That would maybe be the third option. Years ago, Dave, I used to say to audiences, I'll give you a $10,000 reward if you can tell me what the third option is when you have a challenge or a crisis. Well, one guy almost got me. He said, well, you can have a crisis, you can have a challenge, you don't do anything. You just freeze up. You just don't do anything. I thought to myself, so I asked the audience back, I said, if you freeze up, you just kind of sit on the fence, you don't do anything, are you more likely to go forward or backwards? So I had everybody raise their hand. 90% of the audience said you're probably going to go backwards if you do nothing. You know what I mean? So
there is no move. So what you're saying is, and this is a phenomenon in nature. If something isn't growing, it's dying.
Oh wow!
There is no staying still.
I like that.
Either something's growing or it's dying.
Wow.
There is no standing still.
All right, I'm going to use that in my next speech. Thank you, Dave. I appreciate that. That's awesome. And that's just, as you can see, why I hang out with Dave. Dave's one of my mentors in many, many ways. So, if this sounds like a little bit of a
we're kind of stroking each other.
Bro fest here, or bromance going on. I think both of us, and and we'll talk about this in another podcast. Both of us come from somewhat similar backgrounds. We both overcame difficulties in our childhood and different things. I think that's one of the reasons we connect, and we both just kind of our whole lives just keep pushing through, man, and just not giving up. That's probably why we're sitting in here where the streets around us are completely empty.
That's crazy.
And I haven't had time, and we've been wanting to. How many years ago?
We've been wanting to make this podcast for like 2 or 3 years, And it's funny, we joked earlier that it took a global pandemic for us to finally make a podcast.
But it's absolutely true.
But here's the thing: is you talked earlier about what are you going to do with a challenge, and we're both, I don't know about you, I've had some sleepless nights where I've gone down the rabbit hole and read the news and been just absolutely freaked out, and there's good reason to be concerned right now. I'm not downplaying it, but part of our response here is we're going to do something. We're gonna, it's what you always call production therapy, and one of the best, hey, we'll hand you a skill right now. I know we said we weren't going to, but here it is. If you're facing a challenge, just get up and get busy doing something. And that's kind of what we're doing with this podcast.
Absolutely. I always tell people resilience takes place in the striving. Resilience is the ability to bounce back, and that bouncing back happens what I call the effort effect. It's just literally, you don't reach a destination. People call me all the time, or they'll see me in airports. They'll say, hey, you're the author of the book, The Resilience Breakthrough. They go, Christian, how did you achieve resilience? Or when did you know you were resilient? And my answer always shocks them, because I always say to them, well, I haven't reached resilience yet. And they're like, what do you mean you haven't reached resilience? I go, no, it's not a destination. You don't just wake up and you're resilient. Again, resilience takes place in the effort, the striving. It's not a destination. So even though I think about resilience all day long, it's my number one passion. It's my priority. I wrote a book on it. I teach, millions of kids about it. But at the end of the day, I realize that my resilience takes place and just pushing through it. An analogy I like to use, or metaphor I like to use, is if you can imagine a homeless man picks up bottles all day, sleeps under a bridge, walks 5 more miles to the next bridge, picks up bottles all along the way, and goes to sleep and does it the next day, the next day, the next day. That homeless man could be far more resilient than me with all my resources and family connections I have. If I take those and make bad decisions, disrespect my family, my kids, not put effort into life, that homeless man is way more resilient than me. Resilience has nothing to do with success.
Well, that makes perfect sense. I mean, resilience is relative to the
absolutely.
challenge, right? And it's found, like you said, it's not a destination. Like the most resilient person is not going to be the wealthiest person in the world.
Amen.
Right?
Amen.
I think the most resilient person in the world is going to have the biggest difference between their challenges and their outcome. You know, that homeless person. You know, I've known homeless people.
Yeah.
I've known people who I actually tried to, you know, I have an interesting experience. It was, I don't know how relevant it is, but so I met these guys who were homeless, and I worked with some people in our community to offer them an apartment. I just, you know, I met them, I talked to them, and we were going to try to get them an apartment and everything. We took them over to a friend's house, and we let them take a shower. We got them a nice hot meal. Yeah. We got them some new clothes, and we had someone in the community who was going to set them up with an apartment. And at the end of the day, I wish I could remember this guy's name. He just looked at me and he said, "I can't do it." Like he couldn't. Yeah. He wanted to go back to the homeless lifestyle. Like the idea of getting away from it was too challenging. He had developed a comfort zone of being where he was, and the thought of going back to you know, having to pay rent and living in an apartment and all of those obligations that he was facing was too high.
Absolutely.
The pressure was too high. Yeah. And so, you know, you can have someone who's living on the streets who is resilient, and then you can have other people who are shutting down in that, given those same set of circumstances.
What's interesting is, and there's many reasons why someone's homeless. It can be mental illness, it can be background of abuse, definitely substance abuse. There's many reasons someone's in that situation. What's really fascinating to me is understanding, okay, when someone's in that situation, you know, one of the things that makes it really complex for us, sometimes to even, I believe, cause us to even stay in some of these situations, is our ability to adapt. I look at some of the dysfunctional things in my own life is I'm just adapting to this. Human beings are the most adaptable thing on this planet. So
it's crazy.
So like right now, I can tell you, even with this pandemic, if this goes on, some people think this might go on for longer, maybe 2 years.
We'll reach
or whatever.
a new normal.
Yeah. So humans will automatically adapt. So as a therapist, I work with people who don't want to leave their house. They have social phobia. You know, I was raised by my mom has some social phobia.
Right.
You know, in my story, we'll talk about another podcast, but that was one of the mental health issues my mom had. And so is that our adaptation is also what creates our resilience.
Yeah.
Is because we'll adapt to almost any situation, and that adaptation can be very functional, and that adaptation can be very dysfunctional.
Right.
But
we can adapt to things that are harmful.
Yeah. I mean, just take someone
and not want to get out of them.
Yeah.
Or sometimes we can adapt to circumstances we have no control over. And thrive in spite of them.
Exactly. So it's putting people in a situation where, again, they're not hurting themselves, they're not hurting other people, but we do need to be very sensitive, especially when we work with homeless populations. There's many reasons why they're in that situation. But I know similarly with the story you were telling, my experience sometimes, one of my first jobs out of graduate school is working in a homeless program and stuff, and we could provide all these resources, but sometimes people get in that comfort situation. And there's things that I do the same thing. There's things in my own life where I continue to do the same behaviors over and over because that's my comfort zone. And we'll talk about this in another podcast as well, but that's why one of the most important things in the world of resilience is to be able to forgive ourselves, because you have no desire to put one foot in front of another to push through if we're beating ourselves up. And I call it the kryptonite of resilience. People always ask me, what's the number one thing that will destroy resilience? Is to not forgive ourselves. But the minute we forgive ourselves, when we make a mistake or we mess up or we're not perfect, that resilience can kick back in. It gives that resilience a chance. If you're laying in bed at night and you're only focused on what's wrong with yourself, you have less desire to wake up the next morning and push through. So I always tell kids, for example, I say, when your head hits the pillow at night, I want you to ask yourself, what did I do right today? How can I do more of that tomorrow? It's like a snowball rolling down a mountain. That snowball will get bigger and bigger and bigger as we focus on what's right with ourselves, not what's wrong. That's one little seed of resilience. I want to plant that seed right there.
Yeah. But, and that reminded me too, like you always talk about flipping a switch. And again, this is another thing we'll get into later. But sometimes we have that. I know for myself, like I'll have just a streak of negative thoughts. And it's not super productive. But then sometimes I just hit this moment where I flip it. And I go and I just decide, make a decision somewhere somehow to go positive. And then that could cause a streak of positive thoughts.
Absolutely.
And which lead to positive actions.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the keys here that I've learned from you is, how can we try to flip the switch a little bit more each and every day, right?
Yeah.
And just take a little bit more control back.
Well, one thing I'm excited about in this podcast over the next few years, I hope this podcast goes on for years. And I've been wanting to do this podcast for so long. But I'm excited. We're going to be interviewing a lot of different people who have been resilient, who have the ability to bounce back. And as we interview these people, we're really going to look for those moments where they flip the switch, where they said to themselves, how can I use this problem as a resource, as my best friend? And that's kind of one of the entryways into resilience is, we have a crisis, we have suffering, and then we flip the switch. We ask ourselves, how can I use that suffering as a resource, or use that suffering as a reason to put one foot in front of another? Just one example, that I have an older brother who was a police officer. I come from a family of 12 kids. My oldest brother was a police officer. Long, crazy story, but he went to sleep in the back of a pickup truck after a long night shift, and the truck got hit in the back, and he ended up being killed.
My gosh.
And
I don't think I've ever heard this story.
Yeah, yes, and it's crazy. They closed the Beltway down around Washington D.C. Just this guy was my hero.
Your older brother?
Yeah, my oldest brother,
who was a police officer. Went to sleep in the back of a truck. Why was he sleeping in the back of a truck?
Well, it's interesting. He was up all night. He was working this police shift.
Yeah.
And then he was.
What was it? His pickup?
No, it was his father-in-law's pickup.
Oh.
And so he's a minister of a congregation.
Yeah.
And one of the people in his congregation, he was a police officer and a minister, which is an interesting combination.
That's an interesting combination.
I'll tell you more about that. We'll have another conversation.
Arrest you by day and then forgive you for your sins by night.
He was amazing. I mean, it's a funny thing. He used to tease me for being a social worker.
Yeah.
Because he's like, I arrest these guys. You try to save all these people as a social worker. And then the Washington Post wrote an article about him. He would actually find homeless people living in the woods, find jobs for them and stuff. And
that's cool.
Guy's amazing guy. And anyway, so Billy, he one of the members of his congregation needed a new roof. And so he had worked all night.
Oh my gosh!
And then he
so that's why he was sleeping in the pickup.
Because so his father-in-law picks him up, and his father-in-law's like, please come to the front of the truck. And he's like, I'm so tired. If I can get it was like an hour where they were driving to go help somebody, and he went to sleep in the back of the pickup truck. Those windy roads in Virginia.
Yeah.
The pickup truck got hit from behind.
Oh.
And Billy was.
So it was just pulled off on the side of the road, parked.
No, it was just there was. Just a traffic sign ahead saying, construction ahead.
Yeah.
And his father-in-law slowed down. They had those windy 2-lane roads.
Oh, I see. So he was driving.
Yeah.
So his father-in-law was driving. And he was sleeping in the back.
Yeah. And then he
while he was driving.
Yeah.
Okay. And then they stopped.
And then the guy behind him reached down to pick up a sandwich.
Yeah.
And didn't see the sign ahead. So construction went barreling around the corner and hit Billy in the back of the truck. And Billy was killed. And he.
Oh my gosh.
And it was it was one of the most painful moments, right? Of course, in our family. And
how old were you when this happened?
I was probably about. Let me see. At that time, I was probably in my mid-30s.
Okay.
When it happened, and
so this was right after you'd started Why Try.
Yeah. Not too long after I started Why Try, and over 2,000 mourners came to the funeral home to see him and stuff.
Wow.
And I wasn't planning on talking about this.
No, this is an interesting story. I've never heard this story.
You never heard this story? Yeah. So they. Over 2,000, and it's interesting. This is in Spotsylvania, Virginia, is where this where the funeral home where his funeral was held. I was talking to the director of the funeral home, And the funeral home director goes, man, we just buried a congressman here, and we didn't have this many people. Your brother was a minister and a police officer. I said, yeah. And I also said, Billy was a high school dropout. He had this, really difficult background, and which we'll share in another podcast. But from my own life story, so Billy, his mom left when he was really young, never came back and stuff. And Billy was a high school dropout, had tremendous challenges, but married this incredible woman and turned his life around and was able to make it got his GED, made it onto the Fairfax, Virginia Police Department, and worked his way up to becoming a detective. And so people who he had arrested, so I'm standing in line next to his coffin, people are walking through, they were saying, they said, when your brother arrested me, how he treated me in the interrogation room changed my whole life.
Wow.
And then we're sitting there for like 4 hours shaking people's hands, and like literally probably 150 people whispered in my ear, hey, your brother Billy was my best friend. I'm thinking, how are all these people his best friends? So he had community leaders, all these different people, young people, and people from every culture background. They're like, hey, Christian, I just want you to know your brother was my best friend. And all of a sudden it hit me. I was like, man, he surrendered the one-up relationship. And those who have heard about surrendering the one-up relationship and why try, that's where some of that comes from. I started realizing Billy treated people the same, whether they were very successful or they were struggling, whether they were homeless. He saw everybody having value. So anyways, we when the funeral's over, they have a procession, to the Arlington Cemetery where he was buried, because he was a police officer and stuff. So they're, police helicopters flying over. From where 95 runs into the Beltway, there are police officers standing at attention. You have to get permission from Congress, basically, to close the Beltway down.
I mean, how many? I know all police officer funerals are a huge deal.
Yeah.
Because of the dangerous work they do and the critical service that they provide to our communities.
Yeah.
But that sounds like it was a big deal even for a police officer.
Oh, yeah. The director, the police chief said, no, this is very rare. We've never seen anything quite like this.
And it was because of the way that he treated people, whether that was in the interrogation room or in his congregation
or a homeless guy
on the street.
So
that's incredible.
So it had a major impact. I'm glad maybe this is why this needs to come out in this podcast, because that had a huge impact on my social work career. So I started talking about a few minutes ago, flipping the switch. And it's one thing for me to say, okay, how do I take this challenge and convert it to my best friend? So here's my oldest brother who looked out for me. It's a longer story. He had a huge impact on me because he came from a family of 6 kids. Basically, so what we're talking about is give the audience a little context. My mom had me and an older sister, got a divorce, met a man who had 6 kids. It meets my mom. They have 4 more kids, a total of 12 kids. So Billy's the oldest of the 12 kids.
He's like the patriarch of the kids.
Yeah. So he's the one. He looks out for us.
Yeah.
He did a lot of nice things for me growing up. And this guy was one of the most kind human beings you'll ever meet. And so at his funeral, I thought to myself, and for me, this is an example of flipping the switch. At his funeral, I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to honor his life. I'm so hurt. He's passed away. I don't have this guy in my life anymore. My brother here. I'm going to try to carry on his legacy of being unconditional, his legacy of surrendering the one-up relationship. What I mean by surrendering the one-up relationship is you let people know they have value and worth, whether they succeed or whether they fail.
Yeah. It's what's interesting about surrendering the one-up, and I've heard that word thrown around, and I don't always fully understand what it means, but this is the best way I've gotten my head around it, is when you have a one-up, that means that society has handed you privilege.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So whether that's an institution or whether that's just, because of who you were born as, you have privilege.
Yep.
When you surrender the one-up, you take that privilege and you give it up to lift someone else. Is that what it is?
Yeah, absolutely. To surrender the one-up is to really prioritize mankind. I'm going to treat you with dignity and respect because you're a fellow human being.
Yeah.
Because we all know we're 99.8% the same genetically. Our DNA, that debate is over. So we're all connected in some way. And you think, I'm thinking about this. This pandemic right now that's happening. We're all in the same boat. Right now, the whole world is in a pretty equalized situation right now.
Right.
And of course, there's always going to be a few people with privilege. I'm not minimizing that at all. For sure, there'll be a lot of people with some privilege. But what I'm saying is the ability to say, hey, I'm going to surrender this one-up relationship. Because you're my fellow brother, my fellow sister, you're my fellow human being. We're going to, we're all in this together.
Male, female, trans, whatever.
Yeah, It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Man.
And it's interesting when I'm working. I do a lot of work. I've done work in inner cities across this country where kids are killing each other because of their culture, their background, skin color. An activity I always do to help them see that humanity in each other, I'll take a chalkboard and I'll list all the similarities. Both of them want to say goodnight to their moms at night.
Oh, yeah.
They love their mom, their grandmother. They are interested in their significant other, the boyfriend, their girlfriend. They
have a favorite color, maybe?
They have a favorite color.
I mean,
they like certain food. They both like burgers from McDonald's. I mean, so I will sit there and overkill. And I've literally, many times, I filled up probably over 500 things on a chalkboard that are the similarities between them.
Yeah.
And then I'll turn back to the group, and it's by then they're like, they get it.
Yeah.
And I go, so you're killing each other over your skin color, but you have everything else is the same in common. And that goes back to that human condition. And my brother Billy really helped me understand that we are all the same, we're all equal, we're all in this boat together. And so I say, going back to flipping the switch and being resilient is when we have a tragedy, like death is one of the greatest tragedies, if not the greatest tragedy, when from an emotional standpoint, when you really care about someone.
Yeah.
But when for me, when someone passes away, it's the ability to say to myself, in the past 2 years, my mom and dad have both died. This brother died, and so I just turned 50 years old. This year I turned 50.
Death is becoming real for you too. Yeah.
I turned 50 this year, so I'm saying to myself, all right, I got X amount of time left, so I'm going to be resilient as much as I can, because I know I'm here for a short window, and out of love and respect for my dad passing away, my mom passing away, my brother Billy who was killed in that car accident. I'm going to try to be a better human being. I'm going to try to surrender the one-up relationship more. I'm going to flip that switch, and it's a process. Again, I have to flip that switch sometimes 100 times a day. It's not just a one-time thing.
Well, totally. You have to flip it constantly.
Yeah.
So I had never heard that story about Billy.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I've known you for so long. I think I've heard so many of your stories.
But
I've never heard about Billy before.
Yeah, it's just been on my mind a lot lately, especially what you're seeing right now, what all these first responders are doing, what nurses are doing.
It's heroic.
I mean, the resilience, you want to see resilience, man, what these doctors and nurses are doing right now are incredible examples of resilience. We've been really lucky the last, this past year we got the opportunity to train lots of nurses, over 200 nurses at the University of Utah medical school, and just as we've interacted with some of those nurses and I've learned more about nursing, man, they're amazing people.
They're on the front lines.
Yeah, and it's we're going to see resilience rising more and more. The need for resilience is going to be highly needed, and I hope in this podcast, as we interview people, we'll be able to really identify, make understanding what we have to do to tap into that resilience as clear as possible, because resilience is already within us. People always ask me, do you have resilience? Do you not have resilience? Well, human beings are highly, highly resilient. I think I just saw recently on a Google thing, you have like a 1 in 400 trillion chance of being born. When they take into consideration, famine, disease, pandemics, all the different things that could cause us to not be born. The odds of the sperm and the
you're
egg
already beating the odds.
Yeah, you're beating the odds. So if you're
just
on planet, if you're on planet Earth sucking in oxygen, you are highly, highly resilient.
Yeah.
And I think it's important we don't forget how resilient we already are, even while we're going through this crisis now.
I know. I think during a crisis like this, I think there is a temptation to shut down, to give up, and maybe to just give in to, whether that's to, maybe it's a vice, or maybe it's just to shut down and just stay glued to media, But then you see other people who are finally reading that book they've always been wanting to read, or revisiting a novel they've been wanting to write, or us sitting here doing this podcast. I mean, not to pat ourselves on the back, but just whatever it is, it doesn't matter whether it's big or small. Taking action in the face of a crisis.
Absolutely, human beings have a desire to feel productive. Like I can tell you right now, if you had a thing hooked up to me that could assess endorphins or whatever. Today it was kind of a long day. I've been working all day today since early this morning. I started working early, and then it's just we've done quite a bit of different things today. And but if you connected, you can measure my energy level right now doing this podcast is probably quadrupled because I feel like I'm being productive. Human beings have a desire to be productive. When we're productive, our resilience increases.
It does.
And so you can measure your desire to push through by you feel like you're contributing, you feel like you're being productive. And so I just want to plant that seed with everybody out there to pay attention to that, because that has a huge impact on our resilience as well. Now, I do have a question for you, Dave, as we're jumping around a little bit. And by the way, the listeners are going to have to learn that probably when I'm doing a podcast, people pick this up when I'm speaking. Someone said to me the other day, listening to you speak, Christian, is like driving down the road, and then you go into different cul-de-sacs, and then you come back out, and you go into another cul-de-sac. So this... all the listeners out there that have ADHD will relate to this, but
we're going to meander a bit.
Yeah. This may be an ADHD podcast,
but enjoy the journey.
Enjoy the journey, and hopefully, I don't think you'll be bored. But but my question for you, Dave, is I shared with you some of my what I really want to accomplish with this is we hear from people, we really shake out where that internal resilience comes from, and I'm hoping maybe by episode 10, we've really defined, where resilience comes from within, and then we continue to build on that. That's one of my goals of the podcast. But this is a joint thing. We're doing this together. I'd love to hear some of your goals and what you want to accomplish with this as well.
So I love to hear people's stories. Yeah. I love it because I learn from every single human being I come in contact with. And so I've struggled to be resilient at times in my own life. I'll admit, and I'll get into this more, at some point. But I've gone on shutdown at times and done things that were destructive and self-destructive. And you've been a real important mentor for me in teaching me how to channel some of that pain into a productive outcome, and I appreciate that. And I'm trying to continually do it. And I want to. So I guess there's two sides to that. So I want to be a part of discovering.
All right.
So I think we're going to learn. I mean, I think you've written a book about resilience.
Yeah, no, I think we might have to write a new book, because I'm telling you, we're going to learn a lot from this.
I know. We're going to learn a lot from these people that we have on.
Absolutely.
And every single person that we talk to, even just me talking to you right now, I feel like I'm learning new things. Yeah. And so I love that. I enjoy that process. And, I'm a filmmaker. That's my background. I'm a storyteller.
Yep.
And what I love more than anything is just to hear people's stories. Like every human has a beautiful story to tell. Yeah. And so, that's one of the reasons I love talking to you. You have so many fun stories that add color to life. And, we laugh and we joke and we cry and, we share that back and forth. But the rush of that connection, that ability to sit with another human being, whether it's face to face or through video or whatever, and feel like I'm making a connection. We're both present in this moment and we're sharing something, and there's like a third idea that's emerging from it. Yeah. That's a beautiful thing. And there's a rush that I get from that, and I hope that people will feel that same rush as they hear the stories and all of the beautiful things that emerge.
See, one thing I love about podcasts, and I've done, other type of media type things over the last 20 years, and I'm so excited for this moment to be doing my first podcast because, and Dave, I'm sure can tell you, I listen to hundreds of podcasts because I travel all the time. I'm a road warrior. A podcast is something that's really important to me because, what I love is you can go as long as you want, pretty much. I mean, we'll lose
within reason.
Within reason, we're aware. Don't worry, they're monitoring me really close. But
no one is monitoring him. This is one of the first times he has no timekeeper.
It's scary. And so, but for me, spending so much time by myself, traveling, and being in a lot of hotel rooms. I mean, I've literally walked into a hotel room and have sobbed, because of loneliness. They literally say, the worst thing you can do is put someone into confinement, where they're in isolation.
It's torture.
Yeah, it's literally torture.
Yeah, like in prisons when they put people in solitary confinement. We're seeing now that this causes major, long-term, possibly irreversible psychological damage.
Yeah, the other day
it's one of the worst things you could do.
No, absolutely. The other day I was doing some of the math on just how many nights I've spent in a hotel by myself. I've been married for 27 years, and there's probably not too many people who've been married as many years. They spent that much time,
apart
on the road
from their spouse, and is still married.
Yeah, true. That's another workshop.
Yeah, Wendy Moore is his wife's name. I don't know if she wants to be saying her name. No, she's a saint.
Yeah, she is beyond a saint to let me go do this work. And I told my kids, I set my family down a long time ago and said, hey, this will be a sacrifice. We're going to be able to reach millions of people, but my family's going to have to sacrifice. I'm not comparing myself to this at all, but I remember Loretta Scott King talked about that when she when she knew when her husband was doing that type of work and impacting millions of people, the family was going to sacrifice. So I've literally sat down with my family and said, hey, look, this is going to be insane what we're about to do. And
or Billy, your brother, you know, I mean, to be a police officer and to be a minister and to help people fix their roofs. Like, he was out there serving the community.
And he's away from his family.
I have no doubt that his family suffered. And that's it's an interesting tension between trying to do community work, but also trying to make sure that you're there for your own family. Like, there, you know, unfortunately, time is a zero-sum game. There's only so much of it.
Absolutely.
And it's not infinite. We only have so many years to live, and there's only so many hours in the day, and there's only so much work you can do. And I think all you can do is just try to, you know, just move where you stand. Like, just try to do the work you can with the time you have.
No, amen. My family has been really patient with me giving so much time and being away sometimes. And going back to why podcasts mean so much to me, the way I've worked through that loneliness in hotel rooms and traveling as much as I have, I'll put on my headset and I'll spend an hour listening to a podcast. And so many podcasts have changed my life. I mean, I'd probably say 60% of my education in the last 10 years has come from a podcast. Maybe, I don't know, podcast been going for 10 years, 7 years, whatever long.
Oh gosh, no podcast? So the very first podcast, do you remember the first podcast you ever listened to?
This American Life.
Was it?
Yeah, I think
As a podcast or a radio show?
I think, you know what?
They were on NPR.
It was a radio. So, no, I heard that on NPR, but I think I transitioned to listening to it as a podcast. But I think for some reason, that seems like the first one to me was This American Life.
So just a side note. Again, this is another cul-de-sac we'll be entering into. So the very first podcast I ever listened to was Buzz Out Loud with Tom Merritt. And I was in Silicon Valley. I was on a business trip, and I went into a store, and I bought my very first iPod at a little store there in Silicon Valley, and I got on Wi-Fi. I got, you had to like circle the dial, and I punched it in, and I was looking for podcasts, and I found Buzz Out Loud with Tom Merritt, and I remember thinking, this is going to change everything. I could get information without having to be, listening to it live on the radio. I could just listen to it anywhere. I could take it with me. I didn't have to have a radio transmitter. I didn't have to tune in at a certain time. Wow. It's crazy.
And see, for me,
it's changed everything.
Right? I listen to them on airplanes. I listen to them, when I'm exercising. I try to get 12,000 steps every day. I probably average 3,000, but that's another workshop. But I'm working on it. I'm working on it. And so
you do great. What are you talking about?
I'm working on it. But what I'm saying is, podcasts for me have been life changing. And so I honestly, I feel a little emotion right now doing the first podcast, because I know the impact in my own life has been massive. It's been something that has been tremendous to me from an education standpoint. It's been tremendous to me just to combat loneliness, to understand the human condition more. And, I hope that we can be one of those type of podcasts, Dave, that helps people heal. And that's really the goal, to increase resilience. But why do we increase resilience? Because as we have resilience, we heal from trauma, we heal from lots of different things. And that's one of my goals in this.
Yeah, and just being here, being present with you as my friend, like, that is why that's why I work. That's why I'm resilient. That's why I do all the other things. It's so I can spend time with my family, so I can spend time with my friends, because there's just a lot of joy and satisfaction in connecting with another human being. To me, that is what it's all about. And that's why this quarantine thing, I think, is really hard on people. Because we're taking that, we're substituting it with something digital, and it's like almost as good, but not quite. It's not quite the same as fully connecting, but it is. But it is helpful, just like you found with listening to those podcasts late at night. And I don't know about for you, but for me, like, that's why it's not just listening to one person talk. It's listening to a conversation. It's listening to two people go back and forth. And there's something comforting about that for me. When I could be engaged in a conversation, I feel like I'm a part of it, even though my voice isn't a part of it. And it does combat loneliness. You're right. It's not the same as being face to face with a human being. Obviously, that's better. But it does help.
And so, anyways, over the last several years, many people have asked me, Christian, you talk about resilience, you stand in front of an audience, you give all these speeches on resilience. Why is there not a resilience breakthrough podcast? And I'm so excited we got this off the ground. We probably should wind this up here a little bit.
Christian is closing it.
I'm going to close it. I'm going to do something unprecedented. No one has ever seen me stop speaking, but my family is going to kill me if I don't go turn on the grill for them right now. They're texting me saying, "Dad, we're hungry, we're hungry, we're hungry." So
all right, we're gonna close
as much
this down,
as I love podcasts, you
love your family more.
Yeah. There's no success. I heard some quote one day. There's no success outside of the home that compensates for failure in the home and your children being hungry. I don't know. I heard some quote about that.
That's probably a good quote. We'll end on that one.
All right. Hey, all those that listen, thank you so much. And I promise you, we are just getting started. And we are going to literally walk you through step by step where resilience is born from within and how to continue to tap that throughout your lifetime. And we're going to do this by talking to lots of people. And we promise if you listen to us, we will not let you down. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. All right. Episode 1 in the can.